Will the Z6III be a mini Z8? If so, how and what is going to be the difference between the two cameras, which will sit at very different price points? Welcome to another episode of Frames Team. Let's talk about it today. If you're new here, please subscribe. If you're here for the second or third time, I think you should just go ahead and subscribe and support the channel. So it's for the second or the third time when you actually heard that the sensor is going to be a 24 megapixel, 24.5 megapixel sensor. Now, we do not know exactly what kind of sensor this is, whether this is going to be a reuse of the older sensor, something that's already found on the Z6II or on the Nikon ZF, something that actually goes back to probably the Nikon Z6. I don't know whether it is a modified version of that sensor or if it's a completely new sensor. We don't know whether it's going to be a stacked version of that sensor. So that's an area that's sort of opaque. The other thing is that a lot of people are not sure whether this camera should be a 24 megapixel or so sensor. There are expectations right now that the Z6III should be higher than 24 or 25 megapixel sensor, because we're at that spot for some time now, and the Sonys have already moved forward from 24 megapixels. So therefore it's probably a good time for Nikon to provide us an entry to mid-range body which is more than 24 megapixels. There's this other argument that the 24 megapixels should be left for the Nikon Z5, which is what the Grace talked about, and I kind of agree with it. I think that makes sense. If you imagine the Z5 being at 24 megapixels and then the Z6III moving up to 32, 33, 34 megapixels, that differentiates, that places the cameras at different spots. So Z5 at 24, the Z6III at 30 something, the Z8 and Z9 at 46, maybe a Z7 III at 60 something megapixels. Kind of all makes sense. So if it is really going to be a 24 megapixel sensor, then some hearts will be broken. But I think it is still a very, very good amount of resolution, but it's still going to be good enough for most people. So the big point is that we know a bit about the sensor size, but we don't know enough. And you know what? When we are hearing information or rumors about the Z9, I remember, or the Z8 actually, I remember that we are not very sure whether it's going to be a 46 megapixel sensor or a 61 megapixel sensor or going to be a lower megapixel sensor. My bet was on it being a 46 megapixel sensor, the same as the Z9, and I stood my ground throughout. And it made no sense for Nikon to actually come down from 46 or go higher than 46. At this point, I personally do feel that the Nikon Z6III is going to be 30 something megapixels. I don't think that you have the full picture right now. I'll couple that with this fact that this camera is likely to have a modified or improved XP7 processors. Nikon Rumours reported that there's a Chinese source that says it's going to be a duo or maybe dual XP7 processors. Now, I went to the comment section and people have this opinion that it may be a translation issue and duo may just mean modified or slightly changed or slightly improved. Imagine the rest of the bodies with one single XP7 and the Z6III now with two XP7 processors. That's a lot. That's like going back to Z6II days. We don't know why you need that extra processor and what addition stuff it's going to do. But if it requires a modified, improved, adjusted version of the XP7 processor, I think it is going to have to do with what kind of new sensor is going to be part of the camera. If it's a completely new sensor, throwing a lot of data, maybe you need slightly different or differentiated processor. The ISO range is going to be ISO 100 to 64,000 is the rumor. Now, all of this is a new rumor. This is not specification of an existing camera. These are conversations that people have heard from each other, and I'm just reporting like many other people will do. So ISO 100 to 64,000, that's great because I use a ZF and the ZF has the same ISO range, and let me tell you, the files are they're significantly cleaner than the Z6II. At least to me, when I'm editing them, the files look better and more flexible compared to the Z6II files. Okay, 9 subject detection autofocus, which is similar to what the Z9 has, and or potentially what the Z8 will have going forward, which means there's going to be a separate bird IF or bird detect autofocus, which is separate from animal detect autofocus. So animal will include bird as well. Bird is going to be a dedicated, very zoned in autofocus version, which is going to detect birds super well from the clutter. Now the IBIS, I'm thinking that the IBIS is going to be definitely better than the Z9 and Z8 IBIS. Well, the Z9 IBIS was actually amazing. The Z8 is already very good. Somewhere I feel that the Z8 IBIS is maybe half a stop not as good as the Z9, and the ZF IBIS is much better than both of them. It's it's amazing. I'm going to soon do a video just on IBIS. It is so beautiful, the ZF IBIS. It's so organic and stabilized, the look of the video that you get out of the ZF, and I think that's what you're going to see. Or we're going to see an even improved version of that IBIS in the Z6III. And I connect that to the fact that we have heard rumors of the Z6III body being a bit larger. So maybe the IBIS needs a bit more space to move around, and that's why Nikon is doing it. And I would say, I mean, go ahead. That's a great decision if you do that. It's still going to be smaller than the Z8 though, which is great. Now, the single point Nikon rumor says is going to have 310 single point autofocusing points, which is I think higher than what the Z6, higher than the existing 24 megapixel sensors have. So it's probably going to process more data, just be more flexible in autofocusing and be more capable than even the ZF. And as time goes by, we know that Nikon algorithm is actually improving and they're getting more sophisticated. So at this point, I think the Nikon Z6III is going to benefit from all that software power, not just the hardware power, and we're going to see a fantastic autofocusing camera. And I think it's already so close to the Sonys of the world and Canons of the world, and I think it's going to be at par or better than some of them at this price point, which is I expect it to be $2,300 to $2,500 US dollars. Okay, now interesting thing is that it's not going to have NRAW, and I think that's what makes it different from the Z8 and Z9. But puts in the club of the ZF, which also doesn't have NRAW. NRAW is 12-bit in the Nikon bodies, okay, and it's RAW. The ZF has 10-bit log, HLG, and SDR. I think this camera is going to have that. As reported by Nikon rumors, it's going to have 4K 120p, which is what I expected in both N-Log and HLG format. Of course, it's also going to have that in SDR, I'm sure. It's also likely to have 6K 30. Now, I would have liked to see 6K 50 at least. So if you're shooting at 25 or 24 frames per second, you could have slowed down a bit by 100%. That would be nice, but all right, 6K 30 is not bad. I guess, but what I'm interested to see is 1080 240. I think if this camera can do 6K 30, if this camera can do 4K 120 full sensor readout, I think it should be able to do 120 240p. I think Nikon should just do it. They shouldn't just wait. They should just go ahead and just implement that. I mean, maybe, yeah, it's going to have a limitation of 30 minutes. Okay, that's fine. I mean, you're doing slow motion anyway. 30 minutes of slow motion at 240p is a lot. Allow the camera to do it for 15 minutes if you can't do it for 30 minutes. But I think Nikon should allow the camera to do it and execute it. I think they should just go ahead and do it. Especially if you're going to have a modified XP7 processor, which is now named Duo or Dual XP7 processor. It's going to have more optimization. If it's going to have more optimization, then I think Nikon should keep in mind that 1080 at 240 frames per second is going to be fantastic. It's going to be so differentiating for a lot of people who are actually shooting sports and wildlife video, and it's going to be and slow motion of any kind. For a camera like this at this price point, it's going to be, yes, some people have definitely called it out, but I think it's going to be a game changer if it is done well. For a lot of people, it's going to be a reason to go for the Z6 III and go for a Nikon family. Okay, what are the other things we know? We know that the ergonomics is going to be better. We know that the NRAW is not going to be available, which is going to be a differentiator between this and the flagship cameras Z8 and Z9. It's going to have at least one CF Express card and another SD V90 UHS2 card slot, which is great. I mean, I think that should be done. And if that card is also compatible with CF Express Type A, I won't mind that. That's probably a way to go, actually, because you look at this camera as something that's going to stay with you for 3 to 4 years. This camera is going to play that role. Also, I think it should take that updated CF Express cards and not the previous generation CF Express cards. Now, when is this camera expected? This camera is expected in, a lot of people are saying that it's going to be available in April, and I agree with it, because Nikon hadn't really talked about there being 3 cameras in the financial year ending March 2024. Now, if it happens before March, we are going to be lucky, but some of you will have a little more time to save up and probably prepare for this launch if it comes out in April. I would like to actually see this in March, because in India, for example, April is the onset of summers and it starts getting hot, and we could actually plan for if you travel with that new camera if it comes out in March. So I'm looking forward to having the camera in hand in March, but if it doesn't happen, I'm all right with April as well. I just don't want it to be April end, meaning almost May. I don't want that to happen. I don't want Nikon to drag it down to May. It should come out in latest by mid-April, if possible early March, if possible. So that's a timeline, broad timeline. I also see the 35 f1.2 being out before that, which is another blockbuster launch, because honestly, no one has that lens right now, and that's going to give Nikon a competitive edge over others. The planar has been fantastic. I think the 35 1.2 is going to be a statement lens again, especially if it comes out quick and early in time in the calendar year 2024. I think the 35 1.2 should be, Nikon should ensure that the lens is not too long, because it's a 35. We need to move around with it. I mean, 35 means how you manage the space, how you show the background, how you compose carefully, take your time, move around, change the angles. It will be tiring if it's a 1.2 kilo lens, and if it's a very large lens, which is not very easy to balance with any of these cameras. I think Nikon should keep that in mind. It should be a short lens. Make it fat if it needs to be, but try and make it short. I think that's a challenge when it comes to making the 35 1.2. And I think these two exciting things, the 35 1.2 and the Nikon Z6 III, are going to be back-to-back releases and are going to be big news for Nikon early 2024. I think these are the two things that's going to drive the news for Nikon and sales for Nikon. Of course, once the Z6 III comes out, a lot of people will adopt Nikon, and lens sales across board. You're going to see a boost in sales for the 1.8 primes again. The plastic lenses, the 40 and the 28 again. So that's going to be a huge boost for Nikon early next year. And I expect the pricing to be, if this is a 24 megapixel sensor, I really want a price. I think it's fair to ask the camera to be priced at $2150 or maximum $2200, not $2500. Because if in 2024 you're going to release a camera, yes, it's going to have a lot of stuff. Yes, it's going to be a very, very refined camera, very, very well weather sealed. If it's a Mini Z8, it's going to have as good a weather sealing as on the Z8. Remember, they say that the ZF has weather sealing that matches the Z8, which means this camera will definitely have that sort of weather sealing. Yes, with all of this, the big reason for it to be not at $2,500 camera is that next year, early or almost mid 2024, it's still going to be a 24 megapixel sensor. And I think that differentiation is important, crucial. Megapixels matter at this point. It's not like it doesn't transform you as a photographer, but it does give you fundamentally a lot more flexibility, because, you know, especially when you're shooting wildlife, you see the difference between a 24 and a 45 megapixel sensor. Oh, let me tell you, you can crop in so much, especially if you don't have, if the animals or the birds are too far away, the ability to crop in is significant. Number one. Number two, there are a lot of situations when you don't probably have a very long lens, and your high resolution camera sensor is what you're depending on, because that's going to offset your lack of a long lens, a more telephoto lens. The high resolution cameras are priced higher and they have relevance today. I mean, there's no doubt about that. Croppability, the way you can just shoot wider in some situations because you know you can crop in. So that has real world implications. That is not to say that 24 is not good enough. 24 is good enough, is absolutely good enough when you do not have a strategic need to crop, or when you crop minimally just to maybe level the image or something like that, just that, or maybe just take away some of the clutter. When you crop minimally, 24 megapixel is good enough. If you have to seriously heavily crop by 50% or more, then it starts showing. When you zoom in, you may not be able to see the difference between a 33 megapixel A7 IV versus a 24 megapixel. You still see the difference, especially when you're testing lenses. But the real world implication is that when you have to crop by more than 30%, you see the difference of the output on a 24 megapixel Z6II and a 33 megapixel A7 IV. I see that. If you cannot see that, maybe you are forgiving, but I see that, and I'm willing to pay that extra $300 for that extra megapixels. That's where I'm going to leave it. I'm going to see you soon with another video soon. And if you've enjoyed the conversation, if you like to see more of it, I'm going to definitely get the Z6III when it comes out. If you want to see more ZF content, X-T5 content, Sony content, and Nikon content, subscribe. I'm going to see you soon.